Well, some people need an icebreaker to be able to start speaking, but someone that doesn't need an icebreaker to start speaking is actually Daniel Rencrantz. Welcome here.
Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
Cheers.
No, but I must say, I mean, I think you're one of the best public speakers I've seen, and you have a way of speaking which is a bit unorthodox, but also have a way of engaging people, I think, in ways that, the normal type of public speak, hey, my name is blah, 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 I'm going to talk about this, I'm from this company, and blah, blah, blah. But you have a completely different approach, I think, when it comes to that. And you also work for one, I think, of the most important organizations that we have in Sweden, Vinnova, to be able to really promote innovation in companies. So it's, innovation is actually one of my passions as well. And I think the most important thing we need to do in Sweden. So that's why.
So we have many topics that we want to talk to you about.
Anyway, Daniel, very glad to have you here. And perhaps you should start still with just a quick background about yourself. How would you describe yourself?
It's better to listen to the string that bursts than to never stretch a bow.
This is such a typical example.
Now he's
completely different type of.
Say that again.
It's better to listen to the string that bursts than to never stretch a bow. It's a classic poem from a Swedish poetry. And it was actually presented to me by my aunt in 2009. And the reason for that was that I finished 4 big projects. I'd finished a Swedish classic. I'd done my PhD, finished that. We had built a house and got our first kid. So she thought that was a good representation of me. And for me, that sort of like captures what I want to do in life, to do new things, learn that.
Stretch a little bit more.
And sometimes it does burst, sometimes it holds, then you're in your comfort zone, obviously. But I have sort of like a non-tech background, having done an industrial management degree with then did my master's in Scotland, studying logistics and so forth. And then I, as things happen in life, I went with my to-be wife to Linköping, did my PhD in project and product management. How do you develop complex products? Really complex products. Laser writers, you've probably heard of the company Mycronic in Täby. They delivered the equipment that is used by all LCD production manufacturers in the world, but few have heard of them. And I did a contrast.
You see the light when you pass on E4 north, I think.
Exactly, close to Täby Kyrkby.
Mycronic.
Yeah.
Global company in Täby.
Yes. So I compared that to Scania, some completely other companies, because I think it's one of the best tricks if you want to learn. Have the contrast. You have something small compared to something big.
Yeah.
If you have something that is very shiny compared to the darkness. Yeah. So there's sort of like things that have followed me through in my career. So, but apart from that, I'm a big cross-country skier. Started to enjoy that. I was 30 or something, when I did my classic, and I just got hooked.
You got hooked on it. So now you're happy because we've been minus 15 today, or what did you wake up to? I think it was minus 15 at Värmdö.
Something like that. Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? You see the whiteness, and now it's for the first time in 5 years, I can take my car just 5 minutes away during the lunch hour, do some 6 kilometers, something like that.
Which track are you going on then?
Kungsängen, close to to the army base there.
Yeah.
So really good.
You make me feel bad again because I have basically gained 10 kilos during Corona and have not been, exercising.
Maybe you're a new cross-country fanatic that doesn't know about it. I heard it's very close to karaoke. If you like karaoke, you should like cross-country.
I've never heard that, but okay. If that's the case, then I'm all for it for sure.
But that's a challenge, Corona, isn't it? At least in the beginning. Luckily for me, I had my watch talking about AI, and it was sort of like reprimanding me, saying that you're moving too little.
Oh yeah, step counter or stuff like this.
Yeah, exactly. So now I realized I have to walk to work. So every morning I walk 10, 15 minutes to work.
And what does that mean? 10 around the block and back to your kitchen table?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I'm renting a space in my son's room. 2 crowns per week.
So it sounded cool. I'm walking. I need to walk to work as well. That doesn't mean going down the stairs. It means going around the block. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. And do you think the reason that you actually are doing these type of exercises and having this kind of physical fit is helpful also in work in other ways, or would you encourage other people to do that type of keeping fit as you're doing?
Yeah, certainly. For 2 reasons, for me personally at least. One is the health as such.
Yeah.
It's proven by research that it has a positive impact on handling stress,
right,
and sharpness and stuff like that. But for me personally, it also gives me an interest to work with data. I have some apps where you can follow your trend curves and try to understand if I work in this way, will I improve my speed or my stamina and so forth. So for 2 reasons really.
Yeah, that's cool.
You can become AI driven by using
AI driven by sports, or sports driven by AI. I don't know.
Awesome. So you then were in Linköping, which is a great university. I did go there myself and did my PhD there as well. So that's a nice place to be. And what happened after that, for your sake?
Yeah, so I halfway through my PhD, for some reason my wife decided to work in Stockholm, so we moved here, and that's the reason why I started doing part of my research for my chronic, because we moved here. And I also had that fortunate to have a management course for Scania on advanced project management. So I set up a base here, and then I did a postdoc for Linköping University still. But then in the end, it was sort of like a hassle personally to go down there too often. So then by chance, I was doing and ironing my shirt, and my wife said, "Well, here's the ad, read it." And I was like, "Oh."
A job ad?
Yeah, job ad at Vinnova, the Swedish innovation agency. And I read the title, it says something like handläggare, case of, I was like, no way. I'm not, it sounds dull, doesn't it? Turning papers and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the job ad was not the height of sexiness, so to speak.
Oh, not at all, at least not in my opinion. But I decided, well, I'll give them a call. I felt it was time for change anyway. So
And when is this?
2011.
Yep.
Or late 2010.
Something there, yeah.
So I gave them a ring, and super interesting. Working with innovation system, combining different actors, working in different fields. Because if you look at my background, both in terms of research and education, has very much been on spanning different boundaries. You could say that I'm a boundary spanner.
Interdisciplinary. What do you mean with that?
Yeah, exactly. Or it could be organizational boundaries, could be thematical or disciplinary boundaries. For some reason, found it is very interesting to cross those different boundaries.
Intersectional.
Yeah.
Multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
But before we move into Vinnova, because that's interesting in itself, of course, and a lot of people would love, I think, to hear more what they really do and how they work and what you do there, etc. But I still would like to hear a bit more about your PhD and postdoc work and advanced project management. I think so many people.
That's an interesting angle, actually.
Yeah, I think
even for AI.
Project management is super important, especially in AI. That's because so many fail with different AI projects, because it's very different, I think, from different engineering projects, etc. But if you were to just elaborate a bit more what your research focus was within project management, what was your specialty within project management?
Yeah, so this is also sort of one of the challenges. How do you distill that to something very concrete, different models? But trying to explain it was very much on how can you make the prerequisites work if you're going to have a complex project, not just simple products such as a pen is one thing, but if something where you need input from R&D, from manufacturing, and from service already from the start. How can you enable that in an organization? What are the key things for a manager to think about? What are sort of the theoretical constructs they need to be aware of? And one of those that are perhaps a bit fussy, if you're not into that, is what's knowledge? What does it mean that we have the same understanding of a concept? Is that important or not? Are there techniques where you can lure that out into the open, so you have a discussion on that? And some, very, very simple examples of that could be that you only have one coffee machine. Everyone has to gather around that, and you stimulate discussions, because there are actually some research that shows that the interaction between different people almost comes down to nil if you're 20 meters away from each other.
Right.
So how can you
How do you do it in Corona times then?
Yeah, that's difficult, isn't it?
But complex project management, meaning interdisciplinary, meaning multi-agenda, meaning, korthuset, I pull here, what happens here.
Yeah, exactly.
Also complex long development cycles, I guess.
Exactly. And not just complex in terms of big number of parts, for example, big number of organizations involved, but also high level uncertainty.
Okay.
So, for example, the customer needs might be hard to predict, because it's such it's a volatile market, for example, or have to set decisions very early on before you even know, what will the customer actually want, and how do you deal with that when they keep changing, for example?
It sounds like a perfect fit for AI projects where you have uncertainties in many different dimensions. Oops.
Yeah, not only the model itself, but actually the project themselves.
Model. Can we get the data?
But I still don't really understand. So it would be fun to just hear, can you give some example perhaps of some project you did, some kind of hypothesis you tried to prove, or did you do some case studies, or how did you actually perform research in this field? I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, so a tiny example then, to make it very concrete, is that how do you ensure that what you learn from a project goes into the next project?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some. Can you have mechanisms for that? Can you have set up a process for that? Mm-hmm. A lot of people find that you run into the same problem on the next project and so forth. So what I did was that I picked up a tool or a process for that that I implemented in this company.
This was Micronics, right?
Yeah, so it was Micronics. I actually stole it from Scania because they had tried it there, and we did that. So basically, what you do in this process is that first you get together the team. You pinpoint what has happened during a timeline, no analytics whatsoever. In this case, we use POSITs, set it up. This was Q1, Q2, and so forth. And you can, so you go through the timeline, and then you highlight what was the most important activities or happenings during this project. Do we agree or not? You have your pen, and you highlight the three most important for you. And Anders, you do yours and so forth. And then we discuss this. No analytics really, but just what happened. And you do this by changing from individual reflections. So everyone put up their poses, and then you discuss, because otherwise you get funneling into everyone group thinking. Yeah. And after that, you highlight different analytical themes that you find are important, such as one heading could be, what were the pitfalls? Why didn't we achieve what we thought? What were the key success factors? And then we had a third one, was an open-ended one, to lure out those things that are hard to determine. So a reflection. How come that? ... Why do we always miss out on our budgets?
To weed out even the harder, more obscure topics.
Exactly. And then you do that also on an individual level, and then on a group level. And then obviously the third step is, okay, what's the action points out of all this? And then if you do this on a regular basis, you will actually get a pattern. So for example, why do we always put out this reflection point? Or didn't we have this pitfall in the last project as well? all right, we need to close the loop to the next project.
So when you said this was a tool, was it like a methodology, or was it actually a tool you used as a framework, methodology of approach to to do retros in one way?
Yeah, so do retros, and then obviously the last step is look forward.
Yes.
So, but for me, it was a twofold. And obviously, it was interesting to know to test this tool at the project. So very much action-oriented research, but it was also a way to actually capture data on this project that I was studying, which are not easy to detect in reports, for example, or in logs or stuff like that.
And I have to ask a leading question. It came out of Scania, so how does that? Was that tool part of their lean culture and their lean approaches in Scania, or how was it picked up, or how was it started in Scania? Was it an experiment in Scania? You said you stole it from Scania.
Yeah, at the time at least, it was part of their
Stole is a wrong word. It's a wrong word.
Steal with pride.
No, collaborate.
Yeah.
Well,
at the
Inspired
time,
by.
Yeah, certainly. But at the time, it was part of their toolbox at the R&D factory up at the hill. If you have been to Scania,
yeah. But because this to me is very close to Scania's heart on lean.
Yeah.
To have different approaches to really rethink stuff, which is very impressive. It's part of their DNA, I would say today.
Yeah, certainly, and it was part of how do we actually have continuous improvement in our work. And what was quite interesting at the time was that they had this and did that during the end of the project. But then what often happens with a project is that you leave it, and then perhaps you push it to the line organization, and then a lot of things happen that you don't capture. So what they did was they called it at the time milestone 17, because in their R&D process they had 16 milestones. The 16 was project review, but then they had implemented a 17th one, which was project follow-up. So that was done, I think it was a year or two after the closure. And it was a great exercise that it often gave to newbies or new employees that had the time and needed to know about the process as such. And they were really, the best ones to look at from a fresh point of view. So I think that was a very interesting way to both introduce people, but also to ensure that, what really happened to this, and can we learn something in our project portfolio today.
Before we move on, let's park one topic, because I want to have a topic today where we say, I'm going to put it out there as a cliffhanger, I think projects are dead. I don't think we need projects anymore. I think it's the curse of all evil.
That's
so let's have that as a cliffhanger, and then I will explain myself later.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Okay, to just final or close that kind of topic still with advanced project management. And I guess in Vinnova you see so many people fail many times, and perhaps you can recognize, why did they do it this way, etc. But if you were to give some advice to someone as an expert in project management, and given what you have seen in so many examples now, what are the most common mistakes people do, and how could people try to avoid them going forward?
I think the biggest one, a bit subjective, but my feeling is that we don't fail often enough.
Good. That already.
Yes.
You're linking back to my statement immediately, by the way.
Well, let me explain. I often, at least when, since
because I fully agree with that one.
I mean, it's a failing fast kind of idea.
Failing fast.
Hopefully that we should do more often, for sure. Yeah.
And I have something to say when I'm at conferences speaking to projects that we fund. I often say, if I don't hear any problems from your project, I think three things. One is you're hiding something.
Yes.
2, you haven't started yet.
Good.
Yeah.
And the third one is we haven't taken the risk that was high enough.
I was just waiting for you. We haven't stretched the bow.
Exactly. That's the third one. And it's so easy to go for incremental innovation or incremental improvement. But, that's what our money is
We
for.
need to park first principle. Park that one as well. Park it.
Just a second. Awesome. Okay, so your advice would be, we need to be brave enough to fail more often, and recognize that.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
A second advice would be to, think about how can you measure your progress. Sometimes people get too stuck in, we can't get quantitative measures. Oh, it doesn't matter, does it? You can have, a quasi-quantitative measures as well. So, for example, if you're doing a customer-oriented project and you have a prototype, well, one of the milestones could be, capture all the customers, the important key stakeholders at the customers, and they do their thumbs up or down. And if it's, thumbs ups, well, we have, we're on the right
good
track.
Enough measure, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's good enough, sometimes certainly not.
Yeah.
But at least think about, what's your theory of change in this project.
And
So many useful.
but this project topic, what is the definition of a project?
Well, a classic one is that you have a clear goal, clear budget, and a clear time frame, and it's something that is a bit special, not in your ordinary processing.
So the project triangle.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this?
Yes.
Yeah, we have all heard it, right? But for the listeners who hasn't heard it, we talk about you have the budget constraint, you have the timing constraint, and you have the sort of what do we say, scope constraint, typically, or goal constraint.
Yeah.
So budget would then encompass resources and capacity, so to speak, and then sort of there's something that needs to give typically in the triangle.
Yeah,
I like that.